March 23, 1945, 10:47 in the morning. Winston Churchill sat in his command aircraft minutes from landing in Germany to witness British glory. Field Marshal Montgomery's Operation Plunder, the meticulously planned Rhine crossing, would prove British forces were still the elite of the Allies. Then the radio crackled. 4 words stopped Churchill's heart. Patton crossed last night. Not today. Not with Montgomery's 1,000 guns and airborne drops. Last night, with boats and what Patton later called a band of angry Pennsylvanians. Montgomery's immediate message to Churchill contained 2 sentences. American insubordination has made a mockery of Allied planning. Patton must be relieved of command immediately. What Churchill said next would expose the brutal truth of alliance warfare. To understand Churchill's impossible position, you must understand what Montgomery had been promised. January 12, 1945. Churchill personally assured Montgomery that Operation Plunder would be the centerpiece of Allied victory, not American improvisation. Montgomery spent 2 months planning. 1.2 million men on 25,000 vehicles, 3,500 artillery pieces, airborne drops, smoke screens, the largest river crossing since Normandy. Churchill invited correspondents and prepared statements celebrating British military excellence. Everything was ready except George Patton had other ideas. March 22, 10:37 p.m. Patton called Eisenhower from Luxembourg. Ike, quick update. We crossed the Rhine at Oppenheim. Used assault boats, minimal casualties. Eisenhower's reply revealed instant political dread. George, please tell me you coordinated this with Montgomery. Patton answered casually. Monty's got his crossing tomorrow. Didn't want to bother him with details. Eisenhower hung up and called his chief of staff. Get me Churchill. George just created the biggest diplomatic crisis of the war. 12 hours before Operation Plunder, the Americans had crossed Hitler's last natural barrier. March 23, 6:18 a.m. Montgomery received confirmation. He didn't shout, he went cold. Patton has sabotaged Allied strategy to satisfy his ego. This is insubordination at the strategic level. I want him relieved today. His chief of staff tried to moderate. The crossing was successful, the bridgehead expanding. Montgomery cut him off. Success is irrelevant. Discipline is paramount. Without command authority, we have chaos, not coalition. Montgomery drafted an immediate message. Unauthorized American operation, violation of agreed strategy. Demand Eisenhower relieve Patton. British forces cannot operate beside commanders who ignore structure. Churchill received the message at 9:15 a.m., minutes before landing. He read it 3 times. What are the facts? Patton crossed at Oppenheim. Casualties under 30. Bridgehead secured, no permission. No coordination. Churchill stared out the aircraft window. Montgomery was his chosen general. Careful, professional, the embodiment of British doctrine. But Patton had crossed before Montgomery could even begin. The political math was brutal. Support Montgomery and demand an American general be fired for succeeding too quickly. Support Patton and humiliate British prestige before the world. Churchill's plane landed at 10:52. Montgomery waited rigid on the tarmac. Prime Minister, thank you for coming to witness Operation Plunder. Churchill replied calmly, Field Marshal, I received your message. Walk with me. Away from staff, Montgomery insisted Patton be relieved immediately. Churchill raised his hand. One honest question. If Patton had asked permission to cross last night, what would you have said? Montgomery didn't hesitate. I would have denied it. It distracts from the main effort. Your main effort, Churchill replied. Planned for 2 months while Patton needed nothing. He paused. Bernard, is this strategy or pride? Montgomery flushed. It's command discipline. Churchill answered quietly. It's Patton making you look slow. The words hung in the cold air. Churchill continued. He had defended Montgomery's methods for years. Preparation, overwhelming force, minimal casualties, but this forced hard questions. Patton crossed with boats. Montgomery needed months. The war is ending, Churchill said. Every day we wait, the Soviets move west. Patton understands this. Montgomery asked bitterly, so you choose him over me? I choose to win before the Soviets claim Europe. Churchill admitted he'd wrestled with this for months. After Bastogne, he wrote, "Patton does in days what takes us weeks." Watching Montgomery's preparations, Churchill accepted the truth. British doctrine had been surpassed by American speed. Montgomery warned discipline would collapse. Churchill agreed. Patton violated protocol. He embarrassed Britain. "But if I demand his firing," Churchill said, "the Americans will ask why, and I'll say we fired their most successful general for winning too fast. They provide 70% of the forces." "How does that sound?" artillery thundered. Operation Plunder began, but it was no longer the main event. Churchill told Montgomery history would remember that an American crossed the Rhine first. Not better, faster. Montgomery whispered, "So I've lost." Churchill replied, "We've all lost something. You lost precedence. I lost the illusion British methods still define warfare, but we're winning the war." Churchill returned to his aircraft. He sat in silence 20 minutes, then dictated a message to Eisenhower. He declined Montgomery's request. Patton's crossing was successful and served Allied objectives. Churchill added a handwritten note, "Ike, keep Patton moving. We can't match his speed, but we can't afford to lose it." That evening, Churchill met his physician, Lord Moran, in private. Churchill admitted he chose American results over British pride. "We are no longer the leading military power in this alliance." He did not regret it. Pride doesn't win wars, speed does. He explained coalition reality. This was not a properly run military. It was competing national interests. The side with the most resources made the rules. That side was no longer Britain. Moran recorded Churchill's words. "I pretended we were equal partners. Today I admitted the truth. America is the senior partner. They move faster than caution recommends. That is the future of warfare." The consequences rippled. Montgomery never forgave him. British leadership protested. Churchill replied bluntly, "Would you rather I demand Patton's relief and watch the Americans ignore me?" Patton understood immediately. "The British finally understand this is our war now," he wrote. In his memoirs, Churchill later admitted modern warfare rewarded speed over preparation. Operation Plunder was flawless. But Patton achieved the same objective in one night with a fraction of the resources. The contrast was uncomfortable, but undeniable. Years later, Churchill wrote Eisenhower privately, "Patton was insubordinate, but necessary. He ended the war faster. He saved lives by moving before Germany could organize defense." The lesson was brutal. Sometimes you choose the general who makes you proud. Sometimes you choose the one who wins faster. Churchill chose speed, he chose results. In doing so, he admitted Britain was no longer setting the standard of modern warfare. The empire that once defined military excellence was now struggling to keep pace. Montgomery wanted Patton punished for breaking the rules. Churchill understood Patton had exposed an uncomfortable reality. In modern warfare, the side that moves fastest wins. Britain could no longer move fast enough to lead. The Rhine crossing marked more than a tactical success. It marked a shift in power. Speed replaced ceremony. Results replaced protocol. And the future of warfare passed quietly from British hands to American ones. Churchill never said this publicly, but in private he admitted the truth. The war had changed, leadership had changed, and clinging to pride would only slow victory. Patton broke the rules and crossed first. Montgomery followed perfectly, beautifully, and too late. History would remember both men, but it would remember which method ended the war faster. That was the price of coalition warfare. Someone must lead, someone must adapt. And on the banks of the Rhine in 1945, Britain realized it was no longer setting the pace, it was trying to keep up. The Rhine did not just divide Germany. That night, it divided eras, one defined by preparation and hierarchy, the other by momentum and risk. Patton crossed the line first, and the future followed him across. Coalitions survive on compromise, but they are won by clarity. Churchill chose clarity. He chose speed over symbolism, outcome over etiquette, and the brutal honesty that victory rarely belongs to the most disciplined. Montgomery represented the past at its finest. Methodical, honorable, exact. Patton represented the future, imperfect, reckless, decisive. History did not erase either man. It judged which one ended the killing sooner. When empires decline, they don't fall overnight. They discover, slowly and painfully, that others now move faster, decide quicker, and accept risks they no longer can. Britain learned that lesson on the Rhine, and Churchill, more than anyone, understood the cost of admitting it. But wars are not won by pride preserved. They are won by leaders willing to accept uncomfortable truths and act before it's too late. That decision echoed beyond 1945. Military academies would later study the Rhine crossings not for tactics alone, but for what they revealed about power, ego, and adaptation when alliances are tested under pressure. Churchill's choice showed that leadership is not loyalty to tradition, but loyalty to outcomes. He sacrificed certainty, reputation, and national pride for one objective: ending the war faster than history expected. Montgomery followed doctrine perfectly. Patton ignored it entirely. Both were brilliant, but only one matched the tempo of a collapsing enemy and a rapidly shifting world order. From that moment on, the Allies no longer pretended to be equals. Britain supplied wisdom and experience. America supplied speed, mass, and momentum. The balance was settled without a treaty being signed. And so the Rhine became more than a river crossing. It became the moment Britain accepted a new role. America assumed command of modern warfare, and Churchill chose victory over vanity. Wars end, but the lessons linger. The Rhine crossing became a case study in how power transitions occur, not through announcements, but through performance that cannot be ignored. Churchill knew Britain had not failed. It had simply been overtaken by a partner willing to move before certainty arrived. That realization was more painful than any battlefield loss. From that day forward, Allied command quietly adjusted. American initiative was tolerated, even expected. British planning remained respected, but no longer decisive. Patton never apologized. He believed speed justified everything, and in this case, history agreed. His recklessness shortened the war more than any perfectly synchronized operation could. Montgomery's crossing succeeded exactly as designed. But design was no longer the measure of victory. Timing was, and timing had slipped beyond Britain's control. Churchill would later say leadership means choosing between bad options. On the Rhine, he chose the option that bruised pride but preserved lives. Empires do not fall when they lose battles. They fade when they lose relevance. Britain did not lose the war. It lost the rhythm of modern conflict. The Americans did not replace British courage or intelligence. They replaced British tempo. And in modern war, tempo is everything. That is why the Rhine matters. Not for where it flows, but for what crossed it first: the future.